Hello and welcome to Haunted Montreal's Spooky Story Sessions. I'm your host, Holly Rhiannon, and today I'm going to tell you all about 1428 Stanley Street. Here at Haunted Montreal, we bring you ghost stories in both French and English every Saturday. But before we get into today's story, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notified every time we have a new tale to share. And hey, if you're already subscribed, a big thank you. We're so happy to have you. Now, without further ado, let's get spooky. "1428 Stanley Street is a nondescript brick building with a lot of history that sits in the heart of downtown Montreal. The ramshackle three-story edifice was once the heart of the West End Peel-Stanley gay Ghetto, the city's gay village during the 1970s, when bars Le Mystique and Trucks were located in the building. These were raided by police in 1977, prompting a strong response from the civil rights community. When Montreal's gay village migrated eastwards in the 1980s, the bars began a slow and agonizing decline into their eventual bankruptcies. Other businesses have since tried to make a go of it in the brick building, but rumor has it the place is haunted. According to certain sources, the unassuming building at 1428 Stanley Street has ghosts. A client named Suzanne contacted Haunted Montreal to recount a frightening tale that occurred when she worked there decades ago in a bar called Glass. Suzanne explained, "When I started working there in 1982 and until 1986, it was called Glass and then the Sphinx. Le Mystique was still in business, and there were a lot of patrons there. I remember well because the employees' entrance was in the basement where Le Mystique was. Lots of fun and banter, if you can imagine. In the 80s, you had 3 clubs and 1 tavern in the building, Le Mystique in the basement, a tavern on the ground floor. I think it was called the Stanley Tavern. Glass was on the middle floor, and above that was a rock club that changed names many times. The Oxygen in the 70s, the Blitz, and the Metal in the 80s. When pressed for more details about the hauntings, Suzanne said, "As for my peculiar experiences there, they happened when the Sphinx reopened briefly in 1995. I did work there only a few months back then. The place was indeed not very pleasant. Big waves of depression would engulf me, but they lifted as soon as I got out of the building. That was the first peculiar experience, but it took me a while to figure out that it came from the building and not me. Mostly I chalked it up to nostalgia since I spent many years of my youth in this building as a customer and employee. But how to explain the way this heavy depression would lift as soon as I got outside? Fresh air? Not so sure." Suzanne elaborated on the dark feelings, saying, "It was so heavy that it did bring me to tears many times. Some of my coworkers thought I was on drugs. I was not, and I did not drink on the job either. Me, I thought I was courting a serious mental breakdown since I had had one a year or two before. But again, how could I magically be back to normal as soon as I would pass the door? Besides, I was healthy, and I knew it. That really bothered me. I had the distinct feeling that I was losing my mind." The bad mood continued, according to Suzanne. "It lasted the whole time I was there, maybe 6 months. It was so predictable that once I established the pattern, it became sort of a game for me. You get in the door and this big black cloud of depression engulfs you, but you have no need to fear it because when you get out, it magically disappears. And it works every time, and faster than any anti-depression medicine on the market. Move over, Prozac." In addition to suffering from the constant negative energy in the building, Suzanne also had other experiences which might be described as paranormal. The biggest and weirdest occurrence was the giant footsteps from above, the top floor upstairs. That happened around 5 a.m. when we, the staff, were relaxing and having a few drinks at the bar. This did not happen often, as we usually left for home at around 4 a.m. and rarely, if ever, hung out at the club after our shift." She recalled, "We were talking and having fun, remembering the 80s in that club when it was really hot and happening. Suddenly, these giant and very loud footsteps were heard from above. Exactly like someone, a very heavy someone, running the length of the upstairs many times in a row. Like it was very, very loud. Then, as a joke, I said, 'Who's that fatso doing his jogging inside at 5 a.m.? I thought I was being funny because it was so loud and so obvious that someone was running upstairs, not to mention peculiar. Then I saw the look of the people I was with, the manager and the owner. I saw the look on their faces. They were not laughing, and their faces became white. They were scared, confused, and really shook up. No need to tell you that the fun was over and done with. Me, I was adamant that someone was clearly upstairs. It was obvious. They told me it was impossible because, firstly, both doors to access the above floor were locked and chained with a padlock for extra security. Secondly, the entire upstairs floor was being used as a storage room to pack all the tables and chairs that weren't used for many years. There were many, many of them. They were all on top of each other. In other words, it was so packed up there with tables and chairs that no one could walk on the floor, let alone go for a run. So then, we all went upstairs to investigate. By then, the running footsteps had stopped. Both doors were locked, chained, and padlocked. We could only walk a few steps in front of both doors once inside that space. Deeply disturbed, Suzanne decided that she had enough, exclaiming, "That is when I decided to run and get the hell out of there. I was so shaken I could not wrap my head around it. I needed to walk home alone, clear my head in trying to make sense of all this. I wanted to be alone in part because I knew the people I was with were not very open to the notion of ghosts and supernatural phenomena. I was too shaken up to have an argument. Besides, I like to be alone." One of the strangest things Suzanne recalled that night in the chair-crammed room was a sudden drop in temperature, explaining that it was icy cold and they could see their breath even though it was early summer. She concluded, "When I came back to work a few days later, we did not talk about it. The feeling of heavy oppression was there, and I felt I was the only one feeling it. Then I quit the job a few weeks later. The people I worked with, who I had known for years, were becoming mean, suspicious, and deceitful. That was very strange and weird. I got the feeling that I got out of there just in time." Suzanne's strange experiences may somehow be connected to the turbulent history of the building, which has seen a lot of negative action over the years. When asked about her own theories concerning a haunting, she stated, "You can imagine that with so many different clubs spread over different decades, many violent occurrences did happen. I heard about stabbings, shootings, people dying while descending the stairs drunk, and a couple of passion killings at the trucks. Most of them are hearsay, but during the time I worked there, some of them happened." Despite stories of occasional tragedy or violence, Le Mystique and trucks were also instrumental in spurring social changes for Montreal's queer citizens. As mentioned, during the 1970s, the bars were located in the West End Peel-Stanley gay ghetto, the predecessor of Montreal's famous gay village that exists to the east today. In the early hours of October 21st, 1977, a massive police presence gathered on Stanley Street with a plan to raid both gay bars. Arriving with machine guns drawn, the cops descended on the bars and proceeded to arrest a total of 146 gay men, all of them on questionable charges. Many of those arrested were forcibly given medical tests for venereal diseases, which involved inserting a Q-tip into their urethra before being crammed into tiny, crowded cells for the night. The next day, they were charged with gross indecency. Citizens were outraged at the discrimination and began mobilizing. It was seen as Montreal's Stonewall moment, a reprise of the oppression suffered by the LGBT community in New York City in 1969. At the time, many of Montreal's citizens theorized that the municipal authorities were attempting to remove all elements of the gay community from the downtown core and push them to the outskirts in the east. The following evening, there was tension in the air. Over 3,000 people, gay men and their allies, marched to the intersection of St. Catherine and Stanley Streets. In protest of the police harassment, they blocked traffic, essentially paralyzing Montreal's downtown core. This act of resistance attracted huge media attention and highlighted issues of human rights abuses in Montreal. With pressure mounting, politicians scrambled to resolve the situation. The following December, Quebec's National Assembly approved Bill 88, a new law that added sexual orientation to Quebec's Charter of Human Rights, making it illegal as a basis for discrimination. This law made Quebec the first place in North America to have such protection, sparking one of Montreal's first pride parades in 1979. Despite its important role in helping to secure better human rights for Montreal's LGBT community, Le Mystique finally closed its doors in 2009. After 37 years of operation, it was Montreal's oldest gay bar when it closed. The gay village had migrated eastwards to the St. Catherine Street neighborhood between Barrie and Papineau Streets, taking with it many of the former patrons. The West End Peel-Stanley gay ghetto was no more. Meanwhile, an archivist assisting with this story had a strange encounter while carrying out research at the National Library and Archives of Quebec. While poring over some online documents, she had a bizarre experience which she recounted to us. I was doing my research in the newspapers to see who or what could be haunting the place. Suddenly, I saw on my screen that there was a shooting at the Oxygen Bar in 1979. 5 people were hit by bullets. I keep reading, and at one point, I felt a heavy hand on my head that pushed my head down. Right away, a headache appeared. I was upset because I was not expecting that. I stopped researching a few minutes later, and the headache disappeared. The archivist had been researching Claude Montreuil and Claude Joly, 2 men who were charged with 5 counts of attempted murder after opening fire in the Oxygen nightclub on the night of December 27, 1979. At the nightclub, the 2 men encountered a group of young Italians who had crashed their first party after having been released from prison just a few weeks earlier. After a heated exchange, the gentlemen decided to take things outside. However, as they were headed towards the door, Montreuil instructed Joly to shoot the youths, which resulted in a bloodbath. While Joly and Montreuil claimed they were defending themselves, presiding Judge Choquette didn't buy the argument, saying the whole thing could have been avoided if they had stayed home. Needless to say, Joly was sentenced to 25 years in jail and Montreuil was given 12. Feeling disturbed, the archivist contacted a medium who told her that it might be an entity who wanted to warn her that she was in their territory, as if they wanted to stop her from doing research. To make matters worse, a photographer who was sent to take pictures of the building also had a weird encounter. He had spent over an hour documenting this establishment, but upon returning to his studio, he was shocked to discover that every single photograph he had taken was mysteriously deleted from his digital camera. What had happened to the images? He had no idea. On his second visit, the fresh batteries in his regular camera mysteriously failed. He decided to use his cell phone camera, only to discover that the phone had inexplicably disappeared. It was only after buying new batteries for his camera on his 3rd attempt that he was finally able to take some pictures. Incidentally, his phone was eventually found by an office worker on the west side of Stanley Street, which is unusual because the photographer had only been on the east side of the street. Could it be possible that the same entity who harassed the archivist is also responsible for deleting the photographs and causing the phone to go missing? If so, why might the strange entity want to prevent the investigation into this haunting? Today, Brigade Pizza occupies the ground floor of 1428 Stanley. Founded in April 2013, the restaurant offers custom-built Neapolitan pizzas, salads, and panuzzos, offering a new concept in Canada. When questioned, the young staff who work at Brigade Pizza were surprised to learn that the building was allegedly haunted. According to one young lady, nobody had experienced anything that might be considered paranormal recently, and the upper floors of the building were now being used as office space. Whether or not the hauntings continue to this day is unknown. Furthermore, to date, there is no information that could lead to the identity of the paranormal entity who harassed the archivist and the photographer. Could there be something to hide, like a long-forgotten murder? Only one thing is certain. The building at 1428 Stanley Street has a lengthy and storied history involving passion killings, gunfights, fatal accidents, police brutality, and the violation of human rights. These types of negative occurrences can sometimes lead to haunted activity. Whatever the case, perhaps only more paranormal incidents in the building and continued research will one day lead Haunted Montreal to identify the elusive entity who allegedly haunts 1428 Stanley. Are you a Montreal resident or perhaps a tourist who's experienced something strange at 1428 Stanley Street? If so, we'd love to know. As always, we want to know your theories on what could be going on. Thank you so much for stopping by. If this is your first video, we do hope that you'll stick around for the next one. We put out new stories every Saturday in both French and English. If you'd like to learn more about the organization founded by the talented Donovan King, it's all listed in the description down below, along with links to purchase tickets to in-person haunted storytelling tours. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'll have a new video out for you next Saturday. But until then, stay spooky.